The night Curtis Grady kicked down the motel room door with a crowbar in one hand and rage in his eyes, 14-year-old Eli Vance made a choice that would change everything. He grabbed his 6-year-old sister Rosie, climbed through the bathroom window into a blizzard, and ran barefoot across frozen asphalt toward the only light still burning in Black Hollow, Colorado, the compound of the Ghost Reapers Motorcycle Club. Men who terrified the entire town. Men with prison records and combat scars. Men nobody in their right mind would trust with children. But as Eli collapsed against their steel gate, with Rosie unconscious in his arms, and Curtis's truck headlights cutting through the snow behind them, he realized the most dangerous men in Black Hollow might be his only chance at survival. If you want to see how broken people become family, stay until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. Let's build this community together. The temperature had dropped to 11 degrees when Eli Vance first understood what dying felt like. Not the dramatic kind from movies, the quiet kind. The kind that happens in a locked motel bathroom at 2 in the morning while your mother's boyfriend pounds on the door hard enough to crack the frame. The kind where you press your hand over your little sister's mouth so her crying won't make things worse, and you count the seconds between his fists hitting wood and wonder which number will be the last one you ever hear. Eli was 14. Rosie had just turned 6 3 weeks ago. Nobody had remembered except Eli, who stole a chocolate bar from a gas station and stuck a birthday candle in it. Rosie blew it out in the back of their mother's Civic while rain hammered the windshield, and their mother slept off whatever Curtis had given her in the front seat. That was before things got worse, before Curtis decided they were a problem, before the bruises started showing up on Rosie's arms in places Eli couldn't explain away anymore. Tonight, Curtis had come home from wherever he disappeared to for days at a time, and he'd been different, twitchy, paranoid, talking to himself. Their mother had locked herself in the bedroom and refused to come out. Eli had grabbed Rosie and hidden in the bathroom, but Curtis knew. Curtis always knew. The door splintered. Eli pulled Rosie behind him and felt her small fingers dig into his shirt. Curtis stood in the doorway breathing hard, eyes too wide, jaw working like he was chewing something that wasn't there. He held a crowbar loose in his right hand. Rust stained the metal. "You think you're smart," Curtis said. His voice came out flat, dead, worse than yelling. "You think hiding makes a difference." Eli couldn't speak. His throat had closed. Curtis stepped forward. Rosie whimpered, and Eli saw the bathroom window, small, frosted glass. Probably hadn't been opened in years, but behind the motel was the service alley, and beyond that was the road, and if they could just... He grabbed Rosie, shoved her toward the window, and slammed his elbow into the glass. Pain exploded up his arm. Blood ran hot across his skin. Curtis shouted something, but Eli was already lifting Rosie through the broken frame, feeling the night air rush in like a frozen fist. She tumbled into the snow outside. Eli followed, cutting his stomach on jagged glass, landing hard on concrete that felt like it would shatter his bones. Rosie was crying, barefoot, wearing only her Goodwill pajamas with the cartoon bears that were too small now. Eli grabbed her hand and ran. Behind them, Curtis kicked open the motel's back door. The blizzard hit them like a wall. Snow came sideways, blinding, cold enough to burn. Eli couldn't feel his feet anymore. Rosie stumbled every few steps, gasping, her hand slipping in his grip because both of them were bleeding now. He didn't know from where. Didn't matter. Black Hollow was a dying town. 300 people scattered across 2 miles of frozen wasteland between the interstate and nothing. One grocery store, one diner, a handful of trailers and rotting houses that nobody bothered to maintain anymore. Most of the streetlights had burned out years ago. Eli ran toward the only lights he could see. The compound sat at the edge of town like a wound that refused to heal. Chain-link fence, razor wire, security lights that buzzed and flickered. The sign bolted to the gate said Ghost Reapers MC, private property. Trespassers will be dealt with. Eli had seen the men who lived there. Everyone in Black Hollow had. They rode through town sometimes in packs, Harleys roaring, leather vests marked with skulls and patches Eli didn't understand. People crossed the street when they saw them coming. Store owners locked their doors. His mother had told him once, when she was still sober enough to form sentences, that the Ghost Reapers were dangerous. Criminals. Men you didn't look at. Men you definitely didn't approach. But Curtis was 50 yards behind them now, truck headlights cutting through the storm. Eli hit the gate at a full sprint. The impact rattled his teeth. Rosie collapsed against him, barely conscious. Eli grabbed the chain link with bloody fingers and screamed. No words, just sound, raw and desperate and breaking. For 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then the security light above the gate shifted, and Eli saw a man standing in the snow 15 feet away, watching. Tall, maybe 6'2". Fortified build beneath a leather vest that said Ghost Reapers across the back and Sergeant at Arms on the front. His face was hard, all angles and scars, with a jaw that looked like it had been broken and healed wrong. Gray touched his temples. Nicotine stains marked his fingers where they rested near his belt. His eyes were the worst part, flat and tired and utterly empty, like someone had scooped out everything human and left only the parts that knew how to survive. Knox Mercer didn't move, didn't speak. Just stood there in the falling snow, studying Eli the way you'd study a wounded animal that might bite. Behind Eli, Curtis's truck skidded to a stop on the ice. "Please," Eli whispered. His voice cracked. "Please. I'm not asking for me. Just let her sleep somewhere safe tonight. Just tonight, please." Knox's gaze dropped to Rosie. She had stopped crying. Her lips were turning blue. One of her sneakers was missing. Eli didn't remember when she'd lost it. Curtis's truck door slammed. Knox's jaw tightened. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. Like he'd seen this moment before in a different life and it hadn't ended well. He looked past Eli toward Curtis, who stood beside his truck now, crowbar still in hand, breathing plumes of frost into the air. "You need to walk away," Knox said. His voice was gravel, flat, no emotion. Curtis laughed. It sounded wrong, hollow. "Those are my kids." "They're not. You don't know shit about—" "I know what I'm looking at." Knox took one step forward. Just one. But the air changed. The temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "And I'm telling you to get in your truck and leave. Right now." Curtis's grip tightened on the crowbar. For a moment, Eli thought he would actually try it. Thought he would charge the gate, and this would end the way everything in Eli's life always ended, with blood and failure and nobody giving a damn. But then another man appeared beside Knox. Shorter, stockier, bald head covered in scars. Then another. And another. 5 Ghost Reapers standing in the snow, silent as gravestones, eyes locked on Curtis like wolves watching prey decide whether to run. Curtis backed toward his truck. "This isn't over," he said. Knox didn't respond. Curtis climbed into the truck, slammed the door, and reversed onto the road. His taillights disappeared into the storm. Eli's legs gave out. He hit the frozen ground with Rosie still clutched against his chest. She wasn't moving. He couldn't tell if she was breathing. Couldn't tell if he was breathing. Everything had gone numb. The gate rattled. Knox stood over them now, on the other side of the chain link, snow collecting on his shoulders. He looked down at Eli for a long time. Too long. Like he was making a calculation that didn't have a good answer. Then he unlocked the gate. "Get inside," he said. Well, the clubhouse smelled like motor oil, old leather, and something Eli couldn't name. Violence, maybe, or just the weight of too many bad decisions compressed into one space. The main room was larger than Eli expected, with concrete floors, exposed ductwork, and walls covered in motorcycle parts, faded photographs, and military patches arranged like monuments to a war nobody wanted to remember. A long wooden bar dominated one side. Mismatched couches and chairs filled the center. In the back corner, an old TV flickered with the sound off, casting blue light across everything. Eli stood just inside the door, holding Rosie, dripping melted snow and blood onto the floor. 5 Ghost Reapers watched him from various positions around the room. Nobody spoke. Knox locked the door behind them. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home made Eli flinch. "Put her down," Knox said, nodding toward one of the couches. Eli didn't move. Couldn't. His arms had locked around Rosie and his brain was screaming at him that this was a mistake. That these men were dangerous, that he just traded one nightmare for another. "Kid." Knox's voice didn't get louder, but something in it sharpened. "She's hypothermic. You don't put her down and get her warm in the next 2 minutes. She's not waking up, so move." Eli stumbled to the couch. It was old, leather cracked and splitting, but someone had thrown a faded army blanket across it. He laid Rosie down as gently as he could. Her skin was gray. Her eyes were closed. Her chest barely moved. "Mara," Knox said. A woman emerged from a doorway Eli hadn't noticed. 40s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back tight. No makeup. Sharp features that might have been pretty once, but now just looked weathered. She wore black jeans, boots, and a thermal shirt with the sleeves pushed up to her elbows. Her forearms were covered in scars, some surgical, some not. She knelt beside Rosie without hesitation, fingers going to her neck to check her pulse. How long was she outside? Mara's voice was clinical, efficient. 10 minutes, Eli whispered. Maybe more. I don't know. Mara pulled the blanket up over Rosie, then grabbed another from somewhere and layered it on top. Her movements were practiced, familiar, like she'd done this before. "She'll be okay," Mara said. Not to Eli, to Knox. "But she needs to stay warm and still for the next few hours." Knox nodded. Mara looked at Eli for the first time. Her eyes were brown and utterly flat. "You're bleeding." Eli glanced down. His shirt was soaked. He'd forgotten about the window, about the glass, about all of it. "Come here," Mara said. "I'm fine." "You're not. Come here." Eli took one step toward her, then stopped. His vision blurred. The room tilted. He heard someone swear, and then hands caught him before he hit the floor. So, when Eli woke up, he was sitting in a metal folding chair with his shirt off, and Mara cleaning the cuts across his stomach with something that burned like acid. He jerked back. She caught his shoulder and held him still with surprising strength. "Don't move," she said. "You've got glass in 2 of these." The room had emptied. Only Knox remained, standing near the bar with his arms crossed, watching. Eli couldn't read his expression, couldn't read anything about him except the fact that he looked like he'd stopped feeling things a long time ago. "Where's Rosie?" Eli's voice came out hoarse. "Still asleep," Mara said, "which is what she needs." You need to sit still before you bleed all over my floor." Eli forced himself to breathe. In, out, count to 5. The way his school counselor had taught him before he stopped going to school, before Curtis decided education was a waste of time. Mara worked in silence for 3 minutes. Then she stepped back, wiping her hands on a towel that came away red. "You'll live," she said, "but these need to stay clean. You know how to change a bandage?" Eli nodded. "Good." She turned to Knox. "I'm going to check on the girl again." Knox grunted. Mara disappeared into the back room. Silence filled the space she left behind. Knox didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there like a piece of furniture that happened to be alive. Eli pulled his ruined shirt back on, the fabric stuck to the bandages. "Thank you," he said quietly. Knox didn't respond. "I mean it. You didn't have to." "Don't." Knox's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't thank me. You don't know what you just walked into." Eli looked up. Knox's expression hadn't changed, but something in his posture had shifted, tension in his shoulders, weight in the way he held himself. "What do you mean?" Eli asked. Knox finally moved. He walked to the bar, grabbed a pack of cigarettes from behind it, and lit one. Smoke curled toward the exposed ductwork overhead. "You know what this place is?" Knox asked. "A motorcycle club." "We're a gang, kid. Let's not pretend otherwise." Knox took a drag, exhaled. "We run protection. We move product when we need money. Half the guys here have done time. The other half should have. You brought your sister to the one place in Black Hollow that might be more dangerous than wherever you were running from." Eli felt something cold settle in his chest. "Then why did you let us in?" Knox stared at him for a long moment. Then he looked away, jaw working. "Because I'm a goddamn idiot," he said quietly. Footsteps echoed from the hallway. A man emerged, the bald one Eli had seen at the gate. Shorter than Knox, but built like something carved from granite. Tattoos covered his arms, disappearing beneath his leather vest. His eyes were pale blue and utterly devoid of warmth. "She's awake," the man said, "asking for her brother." Eli stood so fast the chair clattered backward. Knox caught his arm. "Slow down." "She needs me. She needs you calm." Knox's grip tightened, not painful, but firm. You go in there shaking like that, you'll scare her. Breathe first. Eli wanted to argue, wanted to rip his arm free and run to Rosie and make sure she was okay. But something in Knox's eyes stopped him. Not sympathy, not kindness, just a kind of exhausted understanding, like he'd lived through this exact moment before and knew how it ended. Eli forced himself to breathe. Knox let go. Go, Knox said. Eli walked into the back room. Rosie was sitting on a cot beneath 3 blankets, small and pale, and so fragile it made Eli's chest hurt. Mara sat beside her, holding a mug of something that steamed. When Rosie saw Eli, her face crumpled. He crossed the room in 2 steps and wrapped his arms around her. She buried her face in his shoulder and cried. Not the scared crying from earlier, but the kind that came from relief and exhaustion and too many nights of holding everything in. I'm sorry, Eli whispered. I'm so sorry. Rosie didn't respond, just held on tighter. Mara stood and quietly left the room, closing the door behind her. Eli held his sister until she stopped shaking. Then he pulled back just enough to see her face. Are you okay? He asked. Rosie nodded. Her eyes were red. Her cheeks were flushed, but she was breathing, warm, alive. Where are we? She whispered. Somewhere safe. For real? Eli didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know if safe was even a word that applied to places like this. But Rosie was looking at him with those big, trusting eyes, and he couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. Yeah, he lied. For real. Rosie leaned against him. Within minutes, she was asleep again. Eli stayed there, holding her, listening to the muffled voices from the main room. He caught fragments. Knox's gravel voice, someone else arguing. Words like liability and cops and what the hell were you thinking? He closed his eyes and tried to remember the last time he'd felt safe. Really safe. Not just the absence of immediate danger, but the kind of safety where you could sleep without listening for footsteps. Where you could wake up and not spend the first 5 seconds figuring out what fresh nightmare had arrived. He couldn't remember. Maybe he never had. Hours passed. Eli didn't sleep. He sat on the floor beside the cot, back against the wall, watching Rosie breathe. Every sound from the main room made him tense. Every footstep in the hallway made him prepare to run. But nobody came. Eventually, gray light began filtering through a high window. Morning. The blizzard had passed. Eli could hear engines outside, Harleys starting up, idling, then roaring away. The ghost reapers leaving for wherever ghost reapers went during the day. The door opened. Mara stepped in, carrying 2 plates of food, scrambled eggs, toast. Nothing fancy, but it was warm and it smelled better than anything Eli had eaten in weeks. Eat, she said, setting the plates on a small table. Both of you. Rosie stirred, woken by the smell. She sat up slowly, rubbing her eyes. Mara left without another word. Eli and Rosie ate in silence. The eggs were overcooked, the toast was burnt at the edges. But Rosie finished everything on her plate and looked at Eli like she wanted more. He gave her half of his. When they were done, the door opened again. This time it was Knox. We need to talk, he said. Eli stood. Can Rosie stay here? Knox nodded. Mara's outside. She'll keep an eye on her. Eli followed Knox into the hallway, then through the main room, empty now except for one guy asleep on the couch, and out into the garage bay. The space was massive. 3 hydraulic lifts, tool chests taller than Eli, motorcycles in various states of disassembly scattered across the floor. The air smelled like gasoline and metal and cold. Knox walked to a workbench in the back corner, grabbed a rag, and started wiping grease from his hands. He didn't look at Eli. That guy last night, Knox said. Curtis, he'll be back. Eli felt his stomach drop. I know. You know what he wants? Me and Rosie out of the way, permanently. Knox nodded slowly. That's what I figured. Silence. I can leave, Eli said. The words tasted like ash. I can take Rosie and we'll go somewhere else. I just need a few hours to... Where? Knox interrupted. His voice was flat. Where are you going to go, kid? You got family, money, a place to stay? Eli didn't answer. Knox tossed the rag onto the bench. That's what I thought. Then what do you want me to say? Eli's voice cracked. You said this place is dangerous, that I shouldn't have come here. So what am I supposed to do? Knox turned to face him for the first time. His expression was still unreadable, but something had changed in his eyes. A kind of resignation. You're supposed to stay, Knox said quietly. For now, until we figure something else out. Eli stared at him. Why? Because you're right. This place is dangerous. But you know what's worse? Knox's jaw tightened. Letting a 6-year-old freeze to death in a snowstorm because we were too worried about liability. We're criminals, kid. We've done bad things, but we're not that. Eli didn't know what to say. Didn't know if he should believe Knox or if this was just another lie in a lifetime of lies. Knox grabbed a pack of cigarettes from the workbench and lit one. There are rules if you're staying here. You don't leave the compound without permission. You don't talk to anyone outside. You don't touch the bikes. You don't go into any room with a closed door. And you keep Rosie out of the way. We've got business to handle, and kids don't need to see that. Understood? Eli nodded. Good. Knox turned back to the workbench. Mara will get you set up with clothes and whatever else you need. There's a shower in the back. Use it. You smell like a corpse. Eli started to leave, then stopped. What happens when Curtis comes back? Knox didn't turn around, just took a long drag from his cigarette and exhaled smoke into the cold air. We'll handle it, he said. But Eli heard the uncertainty buried beneath the words. The doubt. The knowledge that handling it might mean something none of them were ready for. He walked back toward the main room, feeling the weight of everything settling onto his shoulders like snow that wouldn't melt. Behind him, Knox stood alone in the garage bay, staring at his hands like they belonged to someone else. The next 3 days passed in a strange, suspended silence. Eli and Rosie stayed in the back room mostly, venturing out only for meals or when Mara told them the main room was clear. The Ghost Reapers came and went at odd hours. Some Eli recognized from that first night, others he'd never seen before. Nobody spoke to him directly except Knox and Mara. The rest just watched with those flat, evaluating eyes that made Eli feel like an animal in a zoo. Rosie started to relax. Not completely, but enough that she stopped flinching every time a door closed. She colored in a notebook Mara had found somewhere, drawing elaborate pictures of dragons and castles and families that didn't exist. Sometimes she hummed while she drew. Eli hadn't heard her hum in over a year. On the third night, Eli was sitting in the main room while Rosie slept, trying to stay awake, when Knox emerged from the hallway carrying 2 bottles of beer. He handed one to Eli without asking if he wanted it. Eli stared at the bottle. You're 14, Knox said. Not stupid. Drink it or don't. I don't care. Eli took a sip. It tasted terrible, like carbonated rust. Knox sat in the chair across from him, leather creaking. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The TV flickered in the corner, some late-night talk show with the sound off. I made some calls, Knox said finally. Social services, veterans outreach, couple other places. Eli's chest tightened. You're sending us away. I'm trying to find you a place that isn't here. This is fine. We're fine here. Knox looked at him. No, you're not. Better than what? Knox's voice didn't rise, but it hardened. Better than a motel room with a meth dealer? That's a pretty low bar, kid. Eli set the beer down. What do you want from me? You want me to say thank you again? Fine, thank you. But don't pretend you're doing this for us. You said it yourself. You're criminals. You're trying to get rid of a liability. Knox didn't flinch, didn't react at all. Just sat there like Eli's words had bounced off some invisible wall and scattered into nothing. You're not wrong, Knox said quietly. Eli blinked. We are criminals, Knox continued, and you are a liability. Every hour you stay here increases the chances someone asks questions we can't answer. CPS, cops, whoever. And when they start asking questions, people like us end up in cages. He paused. But that's not why I'm making calls. Then why? Knox stared at the beer in his hands. Because I've seen what happens to kids who run out of options. Seen it overseas, seen it in prisons, seen it in places nobody should ever have to see. His jaw tightened. And I'm tired of seeing it. The words hung in the air between them. Eli wanted to argue, wanted to push back against the idea that he and Rosie were just another tragedy in Knox's collection. But he couldn't, because part of him knew Knox was right. They had run out of options. And without these dangerous, violent men who society pretended didn't exist, he and Rosie would already be dead. "What happens if you can't find a place?" Eli asked. Knox met his eyes. "Then we figure something else out." "Like what?" "I don't know yet." Honesty, raw and uncomfortable. Eli didn't know what to do with it. Before either of them could speak again, the front door slammed open. The bald man from the first night, someone had called him Reaper, which Eli assumed was a nickname, stormed in, face flushed, eyes wild. "We've got a problem," Reaper said. Knox stood immediately. "What?" "Curtis is at the fence, drunk, armed, and he's not alone." Eli's blood turned to ice. Knox's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air, a coldness, a readiness. "How many?" Knox asked. 3 trucks. Maybe 8 guys total." Knox nodded once, then he looked at Eli. "Get Rosie. Take her to the storage room in the back. Lock the door. Don't open it for anyone except me or Mara. Understood?" Eli couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "Eli," Knox's voice sharpened. "Move! Now!" Eli ran. He burst into the back room, grabbed Rosie, still half asleep, confused, and carried her through the hallway to a door he'd never noticed before. It opened into a storage room filled with boxes and old furniture. He set Rosie down, locked the door, and pressed his back against it. Outside, engines roared, men shouted. Something metal clanged against the fence. Rosie grabbed Eli's hand. "What's happening?" she whispered. Eli pulled her close. "I don't know." But he did know. Curtis had come back. And this time, he'd brought war with him. The storage room smelled like dust and old engine parts. Eli sat on the concrete floor with his back pressed against the locked door, holding Rosie against his chest. She'd stopped asking questions, just buried her face in his shirt and trembled while the world outside descended into chaos. Voices carried through the walls, muffled, angry. Curtis's voice rose above the rest, slurred and venomous, shouting something about his property and his rights and how nobody told him what to do. Then other voices joined in, men Eli didn't recognize, backing Curtis up, feeding off his rage like gasoline on a fire. The Ghost Reapers said nothing, at least nothing Eli could hear. That silence was worse than the shouting. Rosie's fingers dug into Eli's ribs. "Is he going to take us back?" Eli couldn't answer. His throat had closed around words that wouldn't come. He just held her tighter and listened to boots crunching across frozen gravel outside, the metallic rattle of the fence being tested, the low rumble of idling truck engines that sounded like distant thunder. Then a single gunshot cracked through the night. Rosie screamed. Eli clamped his hand over her mouth, heart hammering so hard he thought his ribs would crack. He waited for more shots, for the sound of the fence coming down, for Curtis to kick through the clubhouse door the way he'd kicked through the motel bathroom and finish what he'd started. But nothing came. Just silence. Heavy and suffocating. Minutes passed. Maybe hours. Eli had lost track of time. His legs had gone numb from sitting on the concrete. Rosie had cried herself into a state of exhausted stillness, somewhere between sleep and shock. Then footsteps approached the storage room door. Eli's entire body locked. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move. The footsteps stopped right outside. 3 knocks. Slow, deliberate. "It's me." Knox's voice came through the wood, flat, tired. "Open up." Eli forced his legs to work. He stood, wobbling, and unlocked the door with shaking hands. Knox stood in the hallway alone. His leather vest was dusted with snow. His knuckles were split and bleeding. There was a darkness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not anger exactly, but something colder. Something that had made a choice and couldn't take it back. "Is he gone?" Eli whispered. Knox nodded once. "Did you?" "No." Knox's jaw tightened. But it was close. Eli waited for more. Knox didn't offer it. "Come on," Knox said. "Both of you. Main room." Eli picked up Rosie, who had gone limp with exhaustion, and followed Knox through the hallway. The clubhouse looked the same as before. Same cracked leather couches, same flickering TV, same military patches on the walls. But the air felt different, charged, like the moment after lightning strikes but before the thunder reaches you. 5 ghost reapers sat scattered around the room. Reaper stood near the bar, arms crossed, face unreadable. Mara sat on one of the couches, cleaning blood from someone's knuckles with the same clinical efficiency she'd used on Eli 3 nights ago. 2 other men Eli didn't know leaned against the far wall, watching everything with eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. Nobody spoke. Knox gestured to the couch. Eli sat down slowly, still holding Rosie. She'd fallen asleep against his shoulder, her breathing soft and rhythmic. Knox pulled up a chair across from them. For a long moment, he just stared at the floor, working his jaw like he was chewing words he didn't want to say. Curtis fired a shot into the air, Knox said finally. Warning shot, trying to prove he wasn't afraid of us. He paused. Stupid move. What did you do? Eli asked. Knox looked up. His eyes were empty. I walked out to the fence, alone. Told him if he fired another shot, I'd make sure it was the last thing he ever did. Eli felt ice settle in his stomach. And he's a coward who only fights people who can't fight back. Knox's voice didn't change, didn't rise, but something underneath it sharpened. He left, took his boys with him, but he made it real clear this isn't over. Reaper spoke up from near the bar. We should have put him down right there. And bring every cop in the county to our door? Knox didn't turn around. Use your head. He's going to come back, Reaper said. You know he is. Next time with more guns, more bodies. And we're supposed to what? Keep playing nice? I'm not playing anything, Knox said. I'm trying to keep us all out of prison. For what? A couple of kids we don't know? The room went silent. Eli felt the weight of those words like a physical blow. Reaper wasn't wrong. They didn't know Eli or Rosie, didn't owe them anything. And every hour they stayed, the Ghost Reapers took on more risk for people who couldn't give them anything in return. Knox stood slowly. He turned to face Reaper, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. You got something to say to me? Knox asked. His voice was quiet. Too quiet. Reaper held his ground. I'm saying we took a vote before letting them in, and not everyone voted yes. That's how clubs work. Majority rules. Majority got outvoted by you, Reaper said. You opened that gate. You brought them inside. And now we're sitting here waiting for a meth dealer and his crew to burn this place down because you couldn't walk away from a couple of strays. Knox didn't move. Didn't blink. You finished? No. Reaper stepped forward. I did 6 years in Lompoc for aggravated assault. You know what that cost me? Everything. My marriage, my kid, any chance at a normal life. And I'm supposed to risk going back for this? Nobody's asking you to risk anything, Knox said. The hell you're not. They're here. That makes them our problem. And when Curtis rolls back through with an AR and decides to light us up, that blood's on you. Knox's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. Mara spoke from the couch, her voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Curtis won't come back tonight. Maybe not tomorrow. He'll wait. Let us think we're safe. Then he'll hit us when we're not ready. So what do we do? One of the men by the wall asked. His voice was younger, uncertain. Mara looked at Knox. We make a call, one way or the other. Knox turned away from all of them and walked to the bar. He grabbed a bottle of whiskey, poured 2 fingers into a glass, and drank it in one swallow. Then he poured another. They stay, Knox said. Reaper swore under his breath. For how long? Mara asked. Until I figure something out. That's not a plan, Reaper said. It's all I've got. Knox set the glass down hard enough to crack it. You want to leave? Door's right there. Nobody's stopping you. Reaper stared at him for a long moment. Then he grabbed his jacket from the back of a chair and walked out. The door slammed behind him. The silence that followed felt like the aftermath of an explosion. Eli could feel the fractures spreading through the room, invisible but real. He'd broken something by being here, something that might not be fixable. Mara stood and walked over to Knox. She didn't say anything, just put a hand on his shoulder for a moment, then left through the same door Reaper had used. The 2 younger members exchanged a look, then followed. Knox stood alone at the bar, staring at the cracked glass like it held answers. Eli wanted to apologize, wanted to say something that would undo the damage, but he knew there was nothing he could say that would matter. Words didn't fix situations like this. "You should sleep," Knox said without turning around. "Both of you." Eli didn't move. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." "But Reaper's right. I said don't." Knox's voice hardened. "I made a choice. I'll live with it. Now get out of here before I change my mind." Eli stood, holding Rosie carefully, and walked back to the storage room. He laid her down on a pile of old blankets someone had left there, then sat against the wall and tried to process everything that had just happened. The Ghost Reapers were fracturing. Because of him. Because he'd shown up desperate and bleeding and dragged them into a war they didn't ask for. Reaper was right. Knox had made a choice that might cost all of them everything, and Eli had no idea how to make it right. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Eli woke to find Rosie already awake, sitting in the corner drawing in her notebook. She'd sketched a motorcycle with elaborate detail, every bolt and gear rendered carefully in pencil. "Where'd you learn to draw like that?" Eli asked, his voice rough from sleep. Rosie shrugged. "I just look at stuff." Eli sat up. His back ached from sleeping on concrete. His stomach felt hollow. "You hungry?" Rosie nodded. They ventured out into the main room together. It was empty except for Mara, who sat at the bar drinking coffee from a chipped mug. She glanced at them, then gestured to a plate of toast on the counter. "Eat," she said. Eli and Rosie took the toast and sat on one of the couches. The bread was cold and hard, but they ate it anyway. Mara watched them for a moment, then spoke. "Knox is in the garage. He wants to talk to you." Eli's chest tightened. "About what?" "Just go." Eli told Rosie to stay with Mara, then walked through the side door into the garage bay. The space was freezing. His breath came out in white plumes. Knox stood near one of the hydraulic lifts, working on a motorcycle engine with methodical precision. He didn't look up when Eli approached. "You wanted to see me?" Eli said. Knox grunted. "Hand me that torque wrench." Eli looked around, found the wrench on a nearby workbench, and passed it over. Knox adjusted something in the engine, then stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag. "You know anything about bikes?" Knox asked. "No." "You want to learn?" Eli blinked. "What?" Knox finally looked at him. "I said, do you want to learn? Simple question." Yeah, I guess." Knox nodded toward the bike. "This is a '78 Shovelhead. Previous owner ran it into the ground. Seized piston, cracked cylinder head, transmission shot. Most people would junk it." He paused. "But most people don't understand that broken doesn't mean worthless." Eli didn't know what to say. Knox grabbed a different tool from the bench. "You're going to be here for a while. Might as well make yourself useful. I'll teach you the basics. You do what I say, when I say it, and you don't touch anything without asking first. Clear?" "Why?" Eli asked. "Why what?" "Why are you doing this?" Knox's jaw tightened. "Because sitting around waiting for Curtis to make his next move is driving me insane. And because if you're going to be underfoot, you might as well learn something." He met Eli's eyes. "And because Reaper's not entirely wrong, you are a liability. But maybe if you're not completely useless, that changes." The honesty was brutal, but Eli preferred it to lies. "Okay," Eli said. Knox handed him a wrench. "Then get over here and pay attention." For the next 3 hours, Knox walked Eli through the basics of motorcycle maintenance. How to check oil levels. How to identify worn brake pads. How to read engine sounds and know what was wrong before you ever opened the casing. Knox didn't lecture. Didn't explain things twice. Just showed Eli once and expected him to remember. Eli's hands were freezing. His fingers ached from gripping tools. But he focused on every word Knox said, committed every detail to memory, because this felt like a test he couldn't afford to fail. Around noon, the garage door rolled open and Reaper walked in. He stopped when he saw Eli, his expression darkening. "What's this?" Reaper asked. "Teaching the kid something useful," Knox said without looking up. Reaper walked closer. "We need to talk." "So talk." "Alone." Knox set down his tools and straightened. Eli, go check on your sister. Eli didn't argue. He walked back toward the clubhouse, but he didn't go inside. Instead, he stopped just outside the door where he could hear their voices through the thin walls. You're making this worse, Reaper said. How? By getting attached. Knox's laugh was hollow. I'm not attached. I'm keeping busy. Bullshit. I've known you for 8 years, Knox. You don't do charity. You don't take in strays. But here you are playing mechanic mentor with a 14-year-old while the rest of us are trying to figure out how to keep Curtis from burning us down. I told you I'd handle Curtis. Handle him how? You gonna kill him? Because that's what it's gonna take. You know that, right? He's not backing off. He's not letting this go. And every day those kids are here, we're closer to a war we can't win. Silence. I made some calls, Knox said finally. Foster care, group homes, everything within 50 miles. They're all full. Or they won't take siblings, or they want background checks and references we can't provide. Then we drive them somewhere else. Drop them at a police station. Let the system figure it out. The system's what failed them in the first place. Not our problem. Knox's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. You want them gone that bad? You take them. Put them in your truck. Drive them wherever you think they'll be safe. But you look that little girl in the eye first and tell her why. Reaper didn't respond. That's what I thought, Knox said. Footsteps approached the door. Eli scrambled back, but not fast enough. Reaper stepped out and nearly walked into him. They locked eyes for a moment. Reaper's expression was unreadable. Anger, frustration, maybe something that looked like pity. You're going to get him killed, Reaper said quietly. You know that, right? Before Eli could respond, Reaper walked past him toward the parking lot where the motorcycles were lined up like metal monuments. Eli stood there, frozen, as the weight of those words settled over him like a blanket soaked in ice water. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He lay on the blankets in the storage room, staring at the ceiling, listening to Rosie's soft breathing beside him. Every sound made him tense, every creak of the building, every gust of wind rattling the windows. Around 2 a.m, he gave up and walked out into the main room. Knox sat alone at the bar, cigarette burning between his fingers, staring at nothing. A bottle of whiskey sat open in front of him, half empty. Can't sleep? Knox asked without looking over. No? Join the club. Eli sat down a few stools away. The silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but heavy with things neither of them knew how to say. Reaper thinks I'm going to get you killed, Eli said. Knox took a drag from his cigarette. Reaper thinks a lot of things. Is he right? Knox finally looked at him. His eyes were bloodshot, tired in a way that went deeper than lack of sleep. Probably. The honesty was like a punch to the gut. Then why are you doing this? Eli asked. Knox stared at his cigarette like it held answers. For a long time he didn't speak. Then quietly, almost too quiet to hear, he said, I had a daughter once. Eli went still. She was 7, Knox continued. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a script. Her name was Sarah. Blonde hair, big eyes, loved drawing pictures of horses. He paused. Her mother and I split when she was 3. I was overseas most of the time anyway. Iraq, Afghanistan. Didn't matter which, just mattered that I wasn't there. Eli didn't say anything, didn't move. When I got back stateside, I tried to be a father, Knox said. Tried to do the whole visitation thing, every other weekend, birthdays, holidays, but I was a mess. PTSD, drinking, couldn't hold a job. Her mother got a restraining order, said I was unstable, dangerous. She wasn't wrong. Knox ashed his cigarette into an empty glass. Last time I saw Sarah, she was 6, he said, standing on her mother's porch, asking why I couldn't come inside. I told her I'd see her soon. That was 8 years ago. The silence that followed felt like something physical, crushing. I don't know where she is now, Knox said. Don't even know if she remembers me. But I think about her every day. Wonder if she's safe, if she's happy, if someone's taking care of her the way I couldn't. He looked at Eli, and for the first time there was something raw in his eyes, something broken. So yeah, Knox said, maybe Reaper's right. Maybe I'm doing this because I see Sarah every time I look at your sister. Maybe I'm trying to fix something that can't be fixed. But I've done a lot of terrible things in my life, kid. Let me do one decent thing before I check out. Eli's throat closed. He tried to speak, but nothing came. Knox turned back to his whiskey. Go to bed. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Eli stood slowly and walked back to the storage room. He lay down beside Rosie and stared at the ceiling until gray light started filtering through the window. He thought the Ghost Reapers were dangerous men who'd taken him in out of some misguided sense of duty, but now he understood. They were broken people trying to save someone else because they couldn't save themselves. And that made everything so much worse. 2 days passed in tense silence. Curtis didn't return, but his absence felt more threatening than his presence. Like a storm building on the horizon, visible, but not yet close enough to strike. The Ghost Reapers moved around the clubhouse like ghosts. Conversations happened in low voices behind closed doors. Reaper barely spoke to Knox anymore. The two younger members, Eli had learned their names were Spider and Axe, watched everything with the nervous energy of people waiting for an explosion. Mara was the only one who seemed unchanged. She treated Rosie's lingering cough with the same clinical efficiency she applied to everything else. She showed Eli how to properly clean the cuts on his stomach so they wouldn't scar. She kept the clubhouse running while the men circled each other like wolves, deciding whether to fight or flee. On the third day, Knox called a church meeting. Eli didn't know what that meant until Mara explained it was club business, members only. He and Rosie were told to stay in the storage room with the door locked. Eli pressed his ear against the door and listened. Voices carried through the walls. Reaper's voice, loud and angry. Knox's voice, lower but harder. Spider saying something about lawyers. Axe talking about moving locations. Mara's voice cutting through all of them with surgical precision. We can't keep doing this, Reaper said. Every day they're here, we're one step closer to losing everything. Then what do you want? Knox asked. Spell it out. I want them gone. Tonight. We drive them to Denver, drop them at a shelter, and we're done. They'll end up back with Curtis within a week. Not if we what? Kill him? You want to add murder to the list of charges we're dodging? Better than waiting for him to kill us. Someone slammed a hand on a table. The impact rattled the walls. This was supposed to be temporary, Reaper said. You said you'd figure something out. It's been almost a week, Knox. Where's your plan? Silence. That's what I thought, Reaper said. You don't have one. You never did. You just... I've got a plan, Knox interrupted. His voice was different now, colder. But you're not going to like it. Try me. We keep them. Officially. The silence that followed was absolute. Have you lost your mind? Reaper's voice climbed an octave. We're a motorcycle club, not a goddamn orphanage. We're a family, Knox said. That's what we tell ourselves, right? Brotherhood, loyalty, all that shit we put on our vests and pretend it means something. Well, here's a chance to make it mean something. By taking in two kids we don't know. By protecting people who need protecting. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? Reaper laughed. It sounded broken. You think social services is going to let a bunch of ex-cons with criminal records adopt children? You think any judge in this state would sign off on that? I know a guy, Mara's voice cut in. Veteran outreach program. They place kids with non-traditional guardians sometimes. Temporary custody. It's not adoption, but it's legal. Legal how? Axe asked. Legal enough, Mara said. I made some calls. They'd need to do background checks, home inspection, the whole thing. But it's possible. Possible doesn't mean smart, Reaper said. This is insane. Maybe, Knox said, but I'm doing it anyway. Then you're doing it without me. Footsteps, a door slamming, engines roaring to life outside. Eli stepped back from the door, heart hammering. They were fighting over him and Rosie, tearing themselves apart. And Knox was willing to lose everything, his club, his brothers, his freedom, to keep them safe. It was too much, too heavy. Eli couldn't carry this. He looked at Rosie, who sat in the corner coloring, completely unaware of the war being waged over her life. And for the first time since running from Curtis, Eli considered leaving, just taking Rosie in the middle of the night and disappearing, finding somewhere else, anywhere else. because staying here was destroying people who didn't deserve to be destroyed. But before he could make that decision, the front gate alarm started blaring. Eli's blood turned to ice. Through the thin walls, he heard Knox swear, heard boots thundering across the clubhouse floor, heard Mara shouting something about positions. Then a voice came through a megaphone outside, amplified and distorted. "Knox Mercer, I know you're in there, and I know you've got what belongs to me. You've got 60 seconds to send them out, or we're coming in." Curtis. He'd brought an army, and the Ghost Reapers were about to go to war. Eli's hand shook as he grabbed Rosie and pulled her away from the door. She looked at him with wide, terrified eyes. "What's happening?" she whispered. "Stay quiet," Eli said. "Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear." Outside the storage room, chaos erupted. Boots pounded across concrete. Metal scraped against metal. Men's voices barked orders in clipped military precision. The Ghost Reapers were moving into defensive positions. Eli pressed his ear back against the door. Knox's voice carried through the clubhouse, calm and cold as winter. "Mara, get the shotguns from the lockup. Spider Axe, cover the side entrance. Don't fire unless they breach. Understand?" "What about Reaper?" Spider asked. "He made his choice. We make ours." Through the walls, Eli heard the megaphone again. Curtis's voice, slurred and venomous. "I'm not playing, Mercer. Those kids are mine. You hand them over now, or I start putting holes in your clubhouse." Knox's response was quieter. Eli couldn't hear the words, but he heard the tone. Steady, unafraid, final. Then glass shattered somewhere in the building. Rosie screamed. Eli clamped his hand over her mouth, heart hammering so hard he thought it would burst through his ribs. He could hear Curtis's crew outside now, spreading around the perimeter, boots crunching on gravel, the metallic click of weapons being chambered, the low growl of truck engines idling. "This is going to get bad." Mara's voice came through the walls. She sounded different now, not clinical, not detached. There was something ancient and cold in her tone, like she'd done this before and knew exactly how it would end. "How bad?" Axe asked, his voice cracked with fear. "Bad enough," Knox said, "but we don't fire first. We let them make the choice. They breach, we defend. That's how this works. Nobody goes to prison for defending their home." Another crash. Closer this time. Then Curtis's voice, no longer amplified, just raw and furious. "You think you're tough? You think hiding behind that fence makes you safe? I'll burn this whole place down with you in it." Silence from the Ghost Reapers. Then the sound Eli had been dreading. The chain-link fence rattling, metal straining, something heavy slamming into it repeatedly. They were cutting through. Knox's voice again, still calm. "Positions. Now." Eli heard safeties clicking off, heard breathing slow and steady the way soldiers breathe before combat, heard the Ghost Reapers transform from broken men into something far more dangerous. And then, just as the fence gave way with a shriek of torn metal, headlights cut through the darkness outside. Not Curtis's trucks. Something else. Multiple motorcycles. Maybe a dozen. Their engines roared in perfect synchronization, drowning out everything else. Eli heard Curtis swear, heard his crew shouting in confusion. Then a new voice cut through the chaos, deep, authoritative, familiar. "That's far enough." Reaper. He'd come back, and he hadn't come alone. The roar of 12 Harley engines shattered the night like thunder tearing through ice. Headlights cut across the compound in blinding arcs, illuminating Curtis and his crew frozen mid-breach, tools still gripping the torn section of chain-link fence. Snow swirled in the beams like ash from a funeral pyre. Reaper sat at the front of the pack on a matte black Road King, his face carved from stone beneath the security lights. Behind him rode 11 more Ghost Reapers, men Eli had never seen before, older and harder than the ones who lived at the clubhouse. Their vests bore the same skull patches, but these were worn thin from years of road wear, stained with oil and blood and history. Curtis took a step back. His crew shifted nervously, their bravado evaporating like steam in winter air. Reaper killed his engine. The silence that followed felt apocalyptic. He swung off his bike with deliberate slowness, boots crunching across frozen gravel, and walked toward the torn fence until only 10 feet separated him from Curtis. You made a mistake, Reaper said. His voice was flat, empty. The voice of a man who'd killed before and wouldn't lose sleep over doing it again. Curtis tried to recover his momentum. This doesn't concern you. This is between me and... You cut through our fence. Reaper's jaw tightened. You threatened our home. That makes it concern me. Curtis raised the crowbar slightly. His hand shook. I just want what's mine. Nothing here belongs to you. Those kids are under our protection now. Reaper took another step forward. The 11 riders behind him dismounted in perfect unison, creating a wall of leather and violence. You want them? You go through all of us, right now, tonight. Make your choice. Curtis's eyes darted between the ghost reapers, counting numbers, calculating odds. His crew had 8 men. The ghost reapers had 12 plus whoever was inside the clubhouse. And these weren't tweakers with stolen guns. These were combat veterans who'd spent decades learning how to hurt people efficiently. Curtis lowered the crowbar. This isn't over, he said. The words came out weak, desperate. Reaper smiled without warmth. Yeah, it is. Curtis backed toward his truck, gesturing frantically for his crew to follow. They scrambled into their vehicles, engines firing up in panicked sequence. Within 30 seconds, all 3 trucks were reversing down the access road, taillights disappearing into the storm. The ghost reapers stood motionless, watching until even the sound of engines faded into nothing. Then Reaper turned and walked toward the clubhouse without a word. Inside the storage room, Eli couldn't breathe. His lungs felt like they'd been filled with concrete. Rosie clung to him, shaking so hard her teeth chattered. The door unlocked. Knox stood there, face expressionless, eyes dark. Come on, he said. It's over. Eli carried Rosie into the main room. The space had transformed. The 11 riders Reaper had brought filled every available space, sitting on couches, leaning against walls, standing near windows with the alert stillness of soldiers on watch. They ranged in age from late 30s to early 60s, all carrying the same weathered hardness, the same 1,000-yard stare that came from seeing too much and surviving anyway. Reaper stood at the bar, pouring whiskey into a line of shot glasses. He knocked one back, then looked at Knox. We need to talk, Reaper said. Yeah. Knox's voice was tight. We do. Reaper gestured to a back room. Knox followed. The door closed behind them. Mara appeared beside Eli, her expression unreadable. Come with me. She led Eli and Rosie to a different room, smaller, warmer, with a space heater glowing orange in the corner. 2 cots had been set up with actual blankets and pillows. It looked almost normal. Stay here, Mara said. Don't come out until morning. Understand? What's happening? Eli asked. Mara's jaw tightened. Club business. Nothing you need to worry about. Is Curtis coming back? No. The certainty in her voice was absolute. Not after tonight. She left before Eli could ask anything else. Rosie climbed onto one of the cots and curled into a ball, still trembling. Eli sat beside her, stroking her hair the way their mother used to before Curtis, before the drugs, before everything fell apart. Are we safe now? Rosie whispered. Eli wanted to say yes, wanted to believe it, but he'd learned not to trust safety. It was always temporary, always borrowed time. I don't know, he said honestly. Rosie's eyes closed. Within minutes, exhaustion dragged her under. Eli stayed awake, listening to the muffled voices from the main room. The 11 riders were talking in low tones, words indistinct but the cadence familiar, the sound of men making plans, calculating risks, deciding what lines they were willing to cross. Hours passed. The space heater clicked on and off. Snow continued falling outside the window, piling against the glass in drifts that looked like graves. Around 3 a.m, the door opened. Knox stood there, backlit by the hallway fluorescence. His face looked older than it had that afternoon, tired in a way that went beyond sleeplessness. We need to talk, Knox said. Now. Eli stood slowly, careful not to wake Rosie. He followed Knox into the hallway, then into the main room. Most of the riders had left. Only Reaper, Mara, and 2 others remained. An older man with gray beard and scars that suggested burns, and a younger guy with missing fingers on his left hand. They all looked at Eli with expressions he couldn't read. "Sit down," Knox said. Eli sat. Knox pulled up a chair across from him. For a long moment, nobody spoke. The silence was suffocating. Finally, Knox leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I need you to tell me everything about Curtis, and I mean everything. Where he lives, who he works with, what he's into. Don't leave anything out." Eli's stomach clenched. "Why?" "Because we need to know what we're dealing with." "You already know what he is. He's a dealer. He's violent. "I know what he showed us tonight," Knox interrupted. "I need to know what he is when nobody's watching." Eli swallowed hard. "He has a house on the east side of town, old ranch property. There's always people coming and going. My mom said he cooks there. Meth, sometimes other stuff." "How many people?" "I don't know. 6, 8? They change." "Armed?" "Always." Knox exchanged a look with Reaper. Something passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or shared calculation. "What about connections?" Reaper asked. "He work for anyone? Answer to anyone?" Eli shook his head. "I don't think so. He talks like he's the boss, but I don't really know." The older man with the beard spoke for the first time. His voice was gravel sliding over broken glass. "Kid's mother. Where is she?" Eli's throat closed. "I don't know." "Guess?" "Probably still at the house, with Curtis. She doesn't leave anymore." Mara's expression darkened. "Because she can't, or because she won't?" "Does it matter?" "Yeah," Mara said quietly. "It does." Eli felt tears burning behind his eyes. He forced them down. "She's an addict. Has been for 2 years. Curtis controls her supply. She'd do anything he tells her to, including forgetting she has kids." The room fell silent again. Knox stood and walked to the window, staring out at the snow. "Here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow morning, I'm making calls. Lawyers, social workers, veterans outreach. We're getting you and Rosie into the system properly. Legal custody, paperwork, the whole thing." "And if Curtis doesn't let that happen?" Eli asked. Knox turned around. His eyes were cold, empty. "Curtis doesn't get a vote." "What does that mean?" Nobody answered. Eli looked between them, Knox, Reaper, Mara, the 2 riders he didn't know. They all wore the same expression, the same readiness, like they'd already decided something and were just waiting for permission to act. "You're going to kill him," Eli said. Not a question, a statement. Knox didn't flinch. "No." "Then what?" "We're going to make sure he understands that touching you or your sister again means dying. And we're going to make sure everyone he knows understands it too." Reaper spoke up. "There's a difference between handling a problem and creating a war. We walk this line carefully. We make it clear Curtis crossed into territory he can't uncross. We make it loud enough that nobody else gets ideas. But we do it smart." "Smart how?" Eli's voice cracked. "That's not your concern," Knox said. "Your job is to keep Rosie safe and stay out of sight. Our job is everything else." Eli wanted to argue, wanted to tell them this was insane, that they couldn't risk everything for 2 kids they barely knew. But the words died in his throat because he knew it wouldn't change anything. These men had made their choice. The only question was what it would cost them. Knox walked back to his chair and sat down heavily. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be complicated." Eli stood on shaking legs and walked back toward the small room where Rosie slept. But before he reached the door, Mara's voice stopped him. "Eli." He turned. Mara's expression was softer than he'd ever seen it, almost human. "You did good. Getting her out. Keeping her alive. That took courage most adults don't have." Eli didn't know what to say. "But you're not alone anymore," Mara continued, "so stop carrying everything by yourself. Understand?" Eli nodded, not trusting his voice. He went back to the room, climbed onto the cot beside Rosie, and stared at the ceiling until gray light filtered through the window and morning arrived like a verdict he couldn't appeal. The next day unfolded in surreal slow motion. Knox disappeared early with Mara, saying something about meetings. The riders from the night before had vanished, leaving only Spider and Axe to watch the compound. Reaper worked in the garage, tearing apart an engine with methodical violence. Eli and Rosie stayed in their room mostly. Rosie drew pictures. Eli tried to read a book someone had left on the shelf, but the words blurred together into meaningless shapes. Around noon, Knox returned alone. His face was carved from granite. "Come with me," he told Eli. They walked into the garage where Reaper was still working. Knox pulled 2 chairs into the center of the bay and gestured for Eli to sit. "The Veteran Outreach Program will take your case," Knox said without preamble. "But there's conditions." Eli's heart hammered. "What conditions?" "Home inspection. Background checks on everyone in the club. Weekly visits from a social worker. And Curtis can't be a factor. At all." "What does that mean?" Knox and Reaper exchanged a look. "It means we need leverage," Reaper said. "Something that makes Curtis disappear voluntarily. Something that doesn't involve violence." "There's nothing like that," Eli said. "Curtis doesn't back down. Ever." Knox leaned forward. "Everyone backs down if you find the right pressure point." "What pressure point?" "That's what we're trying to figure out." Knox's jaw tightened. "Which is why I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Can you do that?" Eli nodded. "Your mother," Knox said. "What's her name?" Jennifer Vance." Knox pulled out his phone, swiped through something, then turned the screen toward Eli. It showed a woman's face, hollow cheeks, dead eyes, stringy blonde hair. She looked 20 years older than she was. "That her?" Knox asked. Eli's chest constricted. "Yeah." Knox pulled the phone back and studied the screen. "She's got warrants, 3 counties. Possession with intent, violation of probation, failure to appear." He paused. "She's looking at serious time if she gets picked up." Eli felt something crack inside him. "So what? You're going to turn her in?" "No." Knox's voice softened slightly. "I'm saying she's vulnerable, and people who are vulnerable can be convinced to cooperate. She won't testify against Curtis. She's too scared. Maybe, but fear works both ways." Knox set the phone down. "If we can get her somewhere safe, detox, protective custody, whatever, and if she's willing to talk to the right people, Curtis's operation falls apart. No operation means no money. No money means no crew. No crew means he's just one angry man with no leverage." Eli wanted to believe it, wanted to think his mother could be saved, that underneath the addiction and fear, there was still something worth rescuing. But he'd stopped believing in rescue a long time ago. "She won't do it," Eli said quietly. "Even if you get her out, even if you offer her safety, she'll go back to him. She always does." Mara's voice came from the doorway. "Not if she doesn't have a choice." They all turned. Mara stood there with an expression Eli couldn't read. "What do you mean?" Knox asked. Mara walked into the garage, pulling off her jacket. "I made some calls to people I used to work with at the hospital. There's a program for addicts with minor children, residential treatment, 6 months minimum, court mandated if necessary." "You want to force her into treatment?" Eli's voice rose. "That won't work. She'll just leave." "Not if leaving means losing custody permanently," Mara said. "Not if the choice is treatment or prison, and especially not if Curtis is facing charges that make associating with her a liability." Knox stood slowly. "You're talking about building a case against both of them." "I'm talking about removing all of Curtis's power at once," Mara said. "His operation, his control over Jennifer, his ability to threaten these kids, all of it, simultaneously." Reaper set down his tools. "That's a lot of moving pieces. Any one of them fails, the whole thing collapses." "Then we don't let them fail," Mara said. Silence fell over the garage. Eli could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears. "This is insane," he whispered. "You're talking about going to war with Curtis, getting my mom arrested, building a legal case, all while trying to keep custody of me and Rosie? That's impossible." Knox looked at him. "Probably. But it's the only play we have." Before Eli could respond, Spider burst through the side door, face flushed, breathing hard. "We've got a problem," Spider said. Knox's expression darkened. "What?" "Sheriff's Department, 2 units, just pulled up to the gate." The air in the garage turned to ice. Reaper moved first, walking to the window to confirm. He swore quietly. Knox grabbed his jacket. "Everybody stay calm. Eli, get back to your room. Don't come out until I say." "What's happening?" Eli asked. I don't know yet. Knox headed toward the door. But we're about to find out. Eli ran back to the room where Rosie was coloring. He locked the door and pressed his ear against it, trying to hear what was happening outside. Voices carried through the walls, authoritative, official. A woman's voice asking questions, Knox responding in measured tones. Then footsteps approached. The door handle rattled. Eli Vance? A woman's voice. Not Mara. My name is Deputy Harris. I need to speak with you. Eli's hand shook as he unlocked the door. A woman in a sheriff's uniform stood there, mid-30s, dark hair pulled back, eyes that had seen too much but hadn't gone dead yet. Behind her stood Knox, face carved from stone, and another deputy, younger, hand resting near his weapon. Are you Eli Vance? Deputy Harris asked. Eli nodded. And is that your sister? She looked past him to where Rosie sat on the cot, frozen. Yes. Deputy Harris pulled out a notebook. I need to ask you some questions. Is that okay? What kind of questions? About how you came to be here? About Curtis Grady? About your mother? She paused. We received a report that you and your sister were in danger, that you fled an unsafe living situation. Is that true? Eli's mind raced. Who had reported them? Curtis? His mother? Someone else? I don't know what you want me to say, Eli stammered. The truth would be good. Deputy Harris's voice wasn't unkind, but it wasn't warm either, just professional. Are you here voluntarily? Yes. Are these men treating you well? Eli glanced at Knox. His expression gave nothing away. Yes, Eli said. Deputy Harris made a note. Curtis Grady claims you were kidnapped, that these men are holding you against your will. Is that true? Eli felt rage flare in his chest. No, that's a lie. We ran from Curtis. He was hurting Rosie, hurting me. We came here because we had nowhere else to go. And your mother? Where is she? I don't know. When's the last time you saw her? A week ago, maybe more. Deputy Harris studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Rosie. Sweetheart, can I talk to you for a minute? Rosie shrank back against the wall. It's okay, the deputy said gently. You're not in trouble. I just want to make sure you're safe. Rosie looked at Eli. He nodded. Deputy Harris knelt down to Rosie's level and spoke in quiet tones Eli couldn't quite hear. Rosie answered in whispers, nodding occasionally, shaking her head at other times. After 5 minutes, Deputy Harris stood and turned to Knox. We need to talk, she said. Outside. Knox followed her into the hallway. The younger deputy stayed behind, watching Eli with suspicious eyes. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. Finally, Knox returned. His face looked older, harder. Deputy Harris stood behind him. Eli, Rosie, we're going to need you to come with us. Eli's stomach dropped. What? No, we're safe here. That's not for you to decide, Deputy Harris said. You're minors in an unstable situation. Until we can verify your safety and locate your mother, you need to be in protective custody. Protective custody where? Eli demanded. Emergency foster placement. Temporary. Just until... No. Eli stood, positioning himself between the deputy and Rosie. We're not going back. We're not... Eli. Knox's voice cut through his panic. Listen to me. You need to go with them. Eli stared at him. You're giving up? I'm following the law. Knox's expression was unreadable. They're right. This needs to be done properly, through channels, legal. They're going to separate us, Eli said. His voice broke. Foster care doesn't take siblings. You said that. Deputy Harris softened slightly. We'll do our best to keep you together. That's not a promise. It's all I can offer. Eli felt everything collapsing, the fragile safety he'd found here, the possibility that maybe, for once, things would work out, all of it crumbling like sand. Rosie started crying. Knox knelt down beside Eli. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Trust me. This isn't the end. But you need to go with them, right now, and you need to stay calm. Can you do that? Eli wanted to scream, wanted to run, wanted to fight. But Knox's eyes held something Eli couldn't quite name. Not defeat, not surrender, a plan. Okay, Eli whispered. He picked up Rosie, grabbed the small backpack with their few belongings, and followed Deputy Harris out of the room. The last thing he saw before they left the clubhouse was Knox standing in the doorway, jaw tight, hands clenched into fists. And for the first time since meeting him, Eli saw something that looked like fear in Knox Mercer's eyes. The sheriff's vehicle smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Eli and Rosie sat in the back, separated from the front by a metal mesh screen. Deputy Harris drove. The younger deputy followed in a second vehicle. Nobody spoke for the first 10 minutes. Then Deputy Harris glanced in the rearview mirror. For what it's worth, I believe you. About Curtis, about why you ran. Eli didn't respond. But the Ghost Reapers aren't the answer, she continued. Those men have records. Violent offenses, drug charges. They're not equipped to care for children. They saved our lives, Eli said quietly. Maybe. But saving someone once doesn't make you responsible for them forever. Eli stared out the window at the passing landscape, frozen fields, dead trees, abandoned buildings slowly being swallowed by snow. Where are you taking us? He asked. Emergency shelter in Sterling, about 40 miles from here. They have space for both of you, together, at least for tonight. And then? Deputy Harris's jaw tightened. Then we find your mother, figure out what's happening with Curtis, and determine what's best for you and your sister. What's best is letting us stay with the Ghost Reapers. That's not how the law works. The law didn't help us when Curtis was breaking Rosie's arm, Eli said. His voice was ice. The law didn't show up when we were living in a motel room with no heat. The law didn't care until Knox Mercer opened his door. Deputy Harris didn't respond, but something in her expression shifted. Guilt, maybe. Or recognition. They drove in silence for another 20 minutes. Then the radio crackled. Unit 4, this is dispatch. We have a 1033 at your current location. Roadblock ahead. Possible suspects in a narcotics investigation. Proceed with caution. Deputy Harris grabbed the radio. Copy that. Can you confirm suspects? Static. Then, Curtis Grady and Associates. Armed and dangerous. Do not engage alone. Back up en route. Eli's blood turned to ice. Deputy Harris swore and grabbed her phone. This is Harris. I need backup at mile marker 14 on Route 33. I have 2 minors in protective custody and possible hostile contact. Repeat, I need backup now. The response came through broken and garbled. Something about units being delayed. Something about another incident across town. Deputy Harris ended the call and accelerated. But ahead, through the falling snow, Eli saw what she saw. 3 pickup trucks parked across both lanes, blocking the road completely. Curtis stood in front of them, crowbar in hand, flanked by 6 men with guns. And behind him, barely visible through the snow, was a woman Eli recognized. His mother. Deputy Harris slammed on the brakes. The vehicle fishtailed on ice before stopping 50 yards from the roadblock. She grabbed her radio again. Dispatch, I have visual confirmation. Curtis Grady and multiple armed suspects blocking Route 33. I need immediate backup. The response was drowned out by static. Curtis started walking toward them. Deputy Harris drew her weapon and stepped out of the vehicle. Curtis Grady, stop where you are. You're wanted for questioning in... The gunshot shattered the air. Deputy Harris dropped. Eli couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't process what he'd just seen. Curtis kept walking, crowbar swinging casually at his side. Behind him, Eli's mother stood frozen, hand over her mouth, eyes wide with horror. Rosie screamed, and Eli realized with absolute certainty that they were about to die. Time fractured into fragments of nightmare. Deputy Harris lay motionless in the snow, blood spreading beneath her like a dark halo. The younger deputy's vehicle was still 50 yards back, the officer scrambling for his radio, shouting coordinates that nobody would reach in time. Curtis walked toward the sheriff's vehicle with the casual inevitability of death itself. 6 armed men fanned out behind him, guns raised, moving with the practiced coordination of people who'd done this before. Eli couldn't move. His entire body had locked, frozen between survival instinct and the absolute certainty that survival wasn't an option anymore. Rosie's screams filled the vehicle. Raw, primal, the sound of a child who understood on some animal level that the world had just turned predator. Curtis reached the passenger side door. He didn't hurry, didn't rush, just gripped the handle and pulled, locked. He smiled. The expression was wrong, broken. like his face had forgotten how human emotions worked. "Come on out, kids," Curtis said. His voice was sing-song, mocking. "Time to come home." Behind him, Eli's mother stood frozen between two of Curtis's crew. She looked smaller than Eli remembered, hollow. Her lips moved like she was trying to speak, but no sound came out. Curtis raised the crowbar and brought it down on the window. Safety glass spiderwebbed. Held. Curtis hit it again. Again. On the fourth impact, the window exploded inward in a shower of crystalline fragments. Rosie's screams reached a pitch that didn't sound human. Curtis reached through the broken window, fingers grasping for the door lock. Then the air filled with a sound that made everything else disappear. Motorcycle engines. Multiple. Coming fast. Curtis froze, hand still extended through the window. His crew turned as one, weapons swinging toward the road behind them. Through the falling snow came 12 Harley-Davidsons riding in tight formation, headlights cutting through the storm like judgment. They didn't slow, didn't hesitate, just bore down on the roadblock with the unstoppable momentum of an avalanche. Knox rode at the front, his face a mask of controlled fury. Curtis's crew opened fire. Muzzle flashes lit up the twilight. Bullets tore through the air, pinging off metal, shattering what was left of the sheriff's vehicle windows. Eli threw himself over Rosie, pressing her down into the footwell, covering her body with his. The Ghost Reapers didn't stop. They split formation at the last second, 6 breaking left, 6 breaking right, roaring past Curtis's trucks on both sides in a coordinated maneuver that spoke to years of riding together. They circled the roadblock like wolves surrounding prey, engines screaming, kicking up snow and gravel in blinding clouds. Curtis's crew spun in confusion, trying to track targets that moved too fast, appeared from too many angles. Then the Ghost Reapers were off their bikes, moving with military precision. Reaper hit the first of Curtis's men with a tackle that sent them both crashing into the snow. The gun went flying. Reaper's fist came down once, twice, 3 times with mechanical efficiency. The man stopped moving. Mara, who ran the clubhouse kitchen and patched up cuts with gentle hands, moved like something carved from ice and violence. She swept the legs out from under a man twice her size, caught his gun mid-fall, and fired 2 shots that took out the rear tires of Curtis's lead truck. The older rider with the burn scars, someone had called him Prophet, moved through Curtis's crew like death itself, methodical and inevitable. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just brutal, efficient violence delivered with the precision of someone who'd done this in deserts halfway across the world. Knox made a straight line for Curtis. Curtis swung the crowbar. Knox caught it mid-swing with his left hand, the impact making a sound like breaking bone. His right fist drove into Curtis's stomach, doubling him over. Knox wrenched the crowbar free and threw it aside, then grabbed Curtis by the collar and slammed him against the sheriff's vehicle hard enough to dent metal. "You shot a cop," Knox said. His voice was quiet, dead, worse than screaming. "You just ended your own life." Curtis tried to respond, but Knox hit him again. Blood exploded from Curtis's nose, painting the white snow crimson. Around them, the fight descended into chaos. Curtis's remaining crew realized they were outmatched and tried to retreat to their trucks. Spider and Axe cut them off, moving with synchronized violence that spoke to hours of training together. The younger deputy had finally gotten out of his vehicle, weapon drawn, shouting orders nobody heard over the roar of engines and screaming. Eli pushed himself up from the footwell, keeping Rosie pressed down. Through the broken window, he could see his mother. She'd broken away from Curtis's crew during the confusion and now stood alone in the snow, arms wrapped around herself, shaking. Their eyes met. For 1 second, one impossible, frozen second, Eli saw something in her face he hadn't seen in years. Recognition. Horror. Maybe even regret. Then Curtis tore free from Knox's grip and lunged toward the sheriff's vehicle, toward Eli, toward Rosie, with the desperate fury of a wounded animal. Knox caught him by the vest and yanked him backward, but Curtis was beyond reason now. He twisted, throwing wild punches, screaming incoherent threats about property and rights, and how nobody took what was his. Knox's expression didn't change. He just set his stance, drew back his fist, and delivered a punch that shut off Curtis's consciousness like flipping a switch. Curtis dropped into the snow and didn't move. The fight ended as suddenly as it had started. Curtis's crew lay scattered across the road. Some unconscious, some nursing broken bones, all disarmed. The Ghost Reapers stood among them like monuments, breathing hard but unbroken. Deputy Harris was being tended to by Prophet, who'd apparently done field medicine before. She was alive, conscious, pressing a hand to her shoulder where the bullet had hit. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Knox walked to the sheriff's vehicle and pulled the door open. He looked at Eli and Rosie huddled in the footwell, both shaking, both covered in safety glass. "You hurt?" Knox asked. Eli shook his head. He couldn't speak. His throat had closed around words too big to fit. Knox reached in and lifted Rosie out gently, then helped Eli out after her. They stood in the snow, surrounded by wreckage and violence, and the smoking barrels of guns, while everything Eli had known about the world rearranged itself into a new shape he didn't have words for. Eli's mother took a step forward, then another. Her face was streaked with tears and makeup, her hands shaking so badly she could barely move. "Eli," she whispered, "baby, I didn't know he was going to. I never wanted." "Don't." Eli's voice came out flat, empty. "Just don't." She stopped. Something crumpled in her expression. The sirens were close now, maybe a mile away, maybe less. Reaper appeared beside Knox, breathing hard, knuckles split and bleeding. "We need to move, now, before those cops get here and start asking questions we can't answer." Knox didn't look away from Eli. "You need to tell them the truth. Everything. About Curtis. About why you ran. About what happened here." "What about you?" Eli asked. "We'll handle our own situation." Knox's jaw tightened. "But you stay clean. You and Rosie both. Whatever happens next, you stay out of it. Understand?" Eli wanted to argue. Wanted to tell Knox that he couldn't just leave. That after everything they couldn't abandon him now. But Knox's expression made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. "Go sit with Deputy Harris," Knox said. "Stay with her until backup arrives. Tell them Curtis shot her. Tell them we stopped him. Leave out everything else." "They won't believe me." "They will." Knox glanced at the carnage spread across the road. "Because it's the truth." The Ghost Reapers were already mounting their bikes. Engines roared to life in sequence. Knox held Eli's gaze for one more moment, and in that moment Eli saw everything the man wasn't saying. The apology, the promise, the hope that maybe this time the broken pieces could be put back together into something that resembled whole. Then Knox climbed onto his Harley, and the Ghost Reapers disappeared into the storm, 12 shadows swallowed by snow and distance. Eli stood there holding Rosie while the sirens grew deafening and the world closed in around them with questions that didn't have good answers. The Sterling County Sheriff's Department interview room smelled like burned coffee and industrial cleaner. Eli sat in a plastic chair bolted to the floor, staring at his reflection in the two-way mirror. Rosie was in a different room with a child services specialist. They'd been separated the moment backup arrived at the roadblock. That was 4 hours ago. Deputy Harris had been airlifted to a trauma center in Denver. Last Eli heard, she was stable. The bullet had missed anything vital, but she'd need surgery. Curtis and his crew were in custody. Eli had watched them being loaded into different vehicles, hands cuffed, faces bloodied. Curtis had been unconscious for the first 30 minutes, then woke up screaming about lawyers and rights and conspiracy. Nobody listened. Eli's mother had been taken somewhere else. He didn't know where. Didn't ask. The door opened. A woman in her 50s entered. Gray hair pulled back, reading glasses hanging from a chain, carrying a folder thick enough to qualify as a weapon. She wore a blazer that had seen better days and an expression that suggested she'd heard every lie the world had to offer and wasn't interested in hearing more. "Eli Vance," she said, sitting across from him. "My name is Detective Sarah Brennan. I've been investigating Curtis Grady for 18 months, and you're going to tell me everything." Eli's hands clenched beneath the table. "I already told the other deputies. I know what you told them. Kid running from an abusive situation. Motorcycle club takes you in. Curtis shows up, shoots a deputy. Ghost Reapers intervene. Nice clean story." Brennan opened the folder. "But we both know there's more to it than that." "Like what?" Brennan pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. It showed Curtis's ranch house from an aerial view. Red circles marked various outbuildings. Like the fact that Curtis Grady isn't just some small-time dealer, Brennan said. He's a distribution hub for methamphetamine moving through 4 counties. He's connected to people who make the Ghost Reapers look like Boy Scouts. And 3 weeks ago, $50,000 worth of product went missing from his operation. Eli stared at the photograph. I don't know anything about that. Maybe not, but Curtis thinks you do. Or more specifically, he thinks your mother does. Brennan pulled out another photo, this one showing Eli's mother standing next to a different man, someone Eli didn't recognize. Jennifer Vance used to work for Curtis, packaging, transport, small stuff, until she started using more than she moved. Curtis kept her around as leverage, insurance. But according to our intelligence, someone's been feeding information to a rival operation, someone with inside access. Eli's stomach dropped. You think my mom, I think your mother is a lot of things, but stupid isn't one of them. Brennan leaned forward. I think she saw an opportunity to get out from under Curtis's control and took it. I think she made a deal with people who promised her protection if she helped them take Curtis down. And I think when Curtis figured it out, that's when things got violent. Eli couldn't breathe. The room felt too small. Where is she? He asked. Protective custody, federal. She's cooperating. Brennan paused. But here's the problem. The people Curtis works for, they don't like loose ends, and your mother just became a very big loose end, which means you and your sister did too. That's why he came after us, Eli said slowly. Not because he wanted us back, because we were leverage. Smart kid. Brennan closed the folder. So here's what happens now. Your mother gives testimony. Curtis and his crew go away for a very long time. The people Curtis worked for get investigated by agencies with acronyms I'm not allowed to mention, and you and your sister get placed in protective services while we figure out if there's any ongoing threat. What about the Ghost Reapers? Brennan's expression hardened. What about them? They saved our lives, twice. They stopped Curtis when nobody else would. They also assaulted multiple suspects, interfered with an active investigation, and left the scene of a crime. Brennan leaned back. Knox Mercer and his crew are looking at serious charges, especially given their records. They were protecting us. Vigilante justice isn't protection, it's crime. Brennan stood. I know you feel grateful to them. I know they stepped up when the system failed you, but that doesn't make what they did legal. What about what Curtis did? Shooting Deputy Harris? Trying to kidnap us? Curtis will face justice. Through the courts. The way it's supposed to work. Brennan walked toward the door, then paused. Look, kid, I get it. The Ghost Reapers are easy to romanticize. Tough guys on motorcycles standing up for the little guy. But they're criminals, and in the real world, criminals don't get to play hero without consequences. She left before Eli could respond. He sat alone in the interview room, staring at his reflection in the mirror, trying to process everything that had just been said. His mother had betrayed Curtis. Curtis had tried to use Eli and Rosie as leverage. The Ghost Reapers had intervened and now faced prosecution for it. And somewhere in all of this, federal agencies were circling like sharks, ready to tear apart whatever was left. The door opened again. This time it was a social worker, young, mid-20s, wearing a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Eli, I'm Amanda. I'm going to take you to the emergency placement facility now. Your sister's already there. She's asking for you. Eli stood on legs that didn't feel like his own and followed Amanda through corridors that all looked the same, institutional beige, fluorescent lights, locked doors that required badges to open. They emerged into a parking lot where snow was falling harder now, burying everything under layers of white that looked clean but felt suffocating. Amanda led him to a county vehicle and opened the back door. Eli climbed in and found Rosie already buckled into the seat, clutching the stuffed dragon someone had given her. Her eyes were red. Her face was pale. But when she saw Eli, she threw herself at him, arms wrapping around his neck with desperate strength. It's okay, Eli whispered into her hair. We're okay. But he didn't know if that was true anymore. They drove through Black Hollow as night fell. The town looked different now, smaller, sadder, like it had given up pretending to be anything other than what it was, a place where people got stuck, where hope went to die. Where kids like Eli and Rosie fell through cracks nobody bothered to fix. The emergency shelter was 40 minutes outside town, a converted farmhouse surrounded by chain-link fence. Institutional, temporary. Another stop in a lifetime of temporary stops. Amanda walked them inside, through intake procedures, past rooms filled with other kids who'd run out of options. She showed them to a small bedroom with 2 single beds, a shared dresser, and a window that looked out over frozen fields. "Get some rest," Amanda said. "Someone will check on you in the morning. If you need anything, press the call button." She left. Rosie climbed onto one of the beds and pulled the blanket up to her chin. She looked so small, so fragile. Eli sat on the edge of his own bed and stared at the wall. Outside, somewhere in the distance, he heard sirens, then silence. He thought about Knox standing in the garage teaching him about motorcycles, about Mara patching up his cuts without judgment, about Reaper coming back with reinforcements when he could have walked away, about Prophet and Spider and Axe and all the others who'd risked everything for 2 kids they didn't know. The Ghost Reapers weren't perfect. They'd done bad things, made bad choices, carried scars from lives that hadn't gone the way they'd planned. But they'd stood up when it mattered, and now they were facing consequences for it. Eli lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to Rosie's breathing slow into something that might have been sleep. He didn't know what happened next, didn't know if they'd ever see the Ghost Reapers again, didn't know if his mother would testify, if Curtis would stay locked up, if federal agents would decide Eli and Rosie were still in danger. All he knew was that for the first time in his life, someone had fought for him, and he couldn't let that be for nothing. So, 3 days passed in a blur of interviews, medical exams, psychological evaluations, and meetings with lawyers Eli didn't understand. Rosie barely spoke. She drew pictures instead, motorcycles and leather vests and men with kind eyes beneath hard faces. On the 4th day, Amanda appeared with news. "There's been a development," she said, sitting across from Eli in the common room while Rosie colored nearby. "Your mother has entered a plea agreement with federal prosecutors. In exchange for testimony against Curtis Grady and his associates, she's being placed in witness protection and mandated to complete a residential addiction treatment program." Eli felt something twist in his chest. "Where?" "I can't tell you that. It's part of the protection agreement." "When do we see her?" Amanda's expression softened with something that looked like pity. "You don't. Not for the foreseeable future. Contact would compromise her security." The words hit like a physical blow. "She's just leaving us?" Eli's voice cracked. "Again?" "She's trying to do the right thing. For all of you." Amanda paused. "But yes, for now, you won't have contact." Rosie looked up from her drawing. "Is Mommy coming back?" Nobody answered. Eli stood abruptly and walked to the window. Snow had stopped falling, leaving everything buried under white that would eventually melt and reveal all the ugliness underneath. "What happens to us?" he asked quietly. "That's the other development," Amanda said. "Knox Mercer has filed for emergency custody." Eli spun around. "What?" "Through the Veteran Outreach Program, with Mara Quinn listed as co-guardian." Amanda pulled out papers from her folder. "They've been working with lawyers for the past 3 days, background checks, home inspection, character references, the whole process." "Can they do that? I thought Detective Brennan said they were facing charges." "The charges were dropped." Amanda's tone was careful, measured. Deputy Harris gave a statement from the hospital, said the Ghost Reapers acted in defense of minors and law enforcement. The prosecutor decided not to pursue it. Eli couldn't process what he was hearing. "So they're not in trouble?" "They're on probation, officially. Any violations and the custody agreement gets revoked immediately." Amanda met his eyes. "But yes, if you agree, you and Rosie can return to the clubhouse under supervised guardianship. Weekly visits from social services, monthly reviews, strict conditions." "And if we don't agree?" "Then we find a traditional foster placement, which, given your circumstances, will likely mean separation, different homes, different counties." The choice wasn't really a choice. "When?" Eli asked. "Tomorrow. If you want it." Eli looked at Rosie. She'd stopped coloring and was watching him with those big, trusting eyes. "What do you think?" Eli asked her. "You want to go back?" Rosie nodded immediately. I want to see Knox, and Mara, and the motorcycles. Something in Eli's chest unclenched. Okay, he told Amanda. We want to go back. Amanda nodded and made a note in her folder. Then she stood and walked toward the door. Amanda? Eli called after her. She turned. Why did Deputy Harris do that? Cover for them? Amanda was quiet for a moment. You'd have to ask her, but if I had to guess? Because she saw the same thing you did. That sometimes the people society labels as dangerous are the only ones willing to do what's necessary to protect the innocent. She left. Eli sat back down and pulled Rosie onto his lap. She curled against him, small and warm and alive. We're going home, she whispered, and for the first time in Eli's life, that word actually meant something. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Eli and Rosie were dressed and packed by 6, waiting by the window, watching the road. At 8:30, a familiar motorcycle rumbled into view, Knox's Harley, followed by Mara on her own bike. They parked outside the fence. Knox dismounted slowly, like his body hurt, and walked toward the intake building. Mara followed. Amanda met them at the door with paperwork. They signed. She checked identification, verified documentation, went through procedures that seemed designed to make difficult things feel impossible. But eventually, she nodded. They're all yours, Amanda said. Don't make me regret this. Knox's expression didn't change. Yes, ma'am. Eli and Rosie walked out into the cold morning air. Knox stood waiting, hands in his pockets, wearing the same leather vest he'd worn that first night. His face was bruised, his knuckles were bandaged, but his eyes were steady. You ready? Knox asked. Eli nodded. Mara pulled out 2 helmets from her saddlebag, small ones, sized for children. Rosie rides with me, Mara said. Eli, you're with Knox. Rosie climbed onto Mara's bike without hesitation, settling in like she'd done it 100 times before. Knox handed Eli a helmet. First rule of riding, always wear this. Second rule, hold on tight and trust the bike. Eli put on the helmet and climbed onto the back of Knox's Harley. The seat was cold. The engine beneath him rumbled like distant thunder. Knox kicked the bike to life, and they rode. Through frozen farmland, past abandoned buildings, down roads that stretched into distance like promises that might actually be kept this time. The wind cut through Eli's jacket, cold enough to burn, but he didn't care. Because for the first time in longer than he could remember, he wasn't running from something. He was riding toward it, toward a compound filled with dangerous men who'd chosen to be guardians, toward a clubhouse that smelled like motor oil and coffee and possibility, toward something that might, just might, turn out to be home. The Ghost Reaper's compound appeared on the horizon, chain-link fence repaired, security lights glowing in the dawn. Knox slowed as they approached the gate, and standing there, waiting, were the others: Reaper, Prophet, Spider, Axe, and 6 more whose names Eli was just learning. They'd all come back. Knox killed the engine. The silence that followed felt sacred somehow. Welcome home, Knox said quietly. Eli climbed off the bike and looked at the clubhouse. Scarred, imperfect, filled with broken people trying to build something that resembled family from whatever pieces they had left. It wasn't much, but it was theirs. And sometimes that was enough. The first week back at the compound passed in cautious silence. Eli and Rosie moved through the clubhouse like ghosts, afraid that speaking too loudly or taking up too much space would somehow break the fragile arrangement that had brought them here. The Ghost Reapers gave them distance, not cold, but careful, like men who'd learned that trust was built in inches, not miles. Knox worked in the garage most days, rebuilding engines with methodical precision. Eli watched from the doorway sometimes, not speaking, just observing the way Knox's hands moved across metal like he was trying to fix something larger than motorcycles. On the 3rd day, Knox gestured him over without looking up. "Hand me that socket wrench," Knox said. Eli grabbed the tool and passed it over. Knox adjusted something in the engine, then stepped back and wiped his hands. "You remember what I taught you?" Knox asked. "Before everything went to hell?" Eli nodded. "Good. Because this shovelhead's yours now." Eli stared at him. "What?" "You heard me." Knox tapped the fuel tank with one knuckle. "Needs a full rebuild. New pistons. Transmission's shot. Electrical system's a disaster, but the frame's solid, worth saving. He paused. Figured you could use a project, something that's yours, something you build with your own hands. Eli's throat closed around words that wouldn't come. He just nodded. Knox pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and leaned against the workbench. Social workers coming by tomorrow. Weekly check-in. They're going to ask you questions about how you're being treated, if you feel safe, if anyone's hurt you. His eyes met Eli's. You tell them the truth, whatever that is. Understand? Even if the truth gets you in trouble? Especially then. Knox took a drag. This only works if it's real. No lies, no pretending. We fuck up, you tell them. They pull you out, that's on us, not you. Eli studied Knox's face. The scars, the tired eyes, the jaw that held too much tension. You really mean that? I don't say things I don't mean. Knox ashed his cigarette. You and Rosie aren't prisoners here. You're not charity cases. You're part of this now, which means you get a voice. Use it. That night, Eli sat at the long wooden table in the clubhouse kitchen while Mara cooked dinner. She moved with the same efficiency she applied to everything, chopping vegetables with surgical precision, seasoning meat with measured attention. Rosie sat on the counter nearby, swinging her legs, humming something off-key. Can I help? Eli asked. Mara glanced over. You know how to cook? Not really. Then you're learning. She handed him a knife and pointed to a pile of potatoes. Peel those, all of them. Don't cut yourself. Eli worked in silence for 10 minutes. His fingers were clumsy. The peeler kept slipping, but Mara didn't criticize. Just watched occasionally and corrected his grip when it got dangerous. Your mom called the social worker, Mara said suddenly. Left a message for you. Eli's hand stopped moving. What did she say? That she's sorry, that she's in treatment, that she hopes you're safe. Mara's voice was flat, clinical. Social worker asked if you wanted to call her back. I told them to ask you directly. Eli set down the peeler. Do I have to? No. Do you think I should? Mara was quiet for a long moment. She stirred something on the stove, tasted it, added salt. I think your mother made choices that hurt you. I think she's trying to do better now. Whether that's enough is something only you can decide. What would you do? Mara turned to face him fully. Her expression was harder than usual. My mother was an alcoholic who chose the bottle over her kids every single day for 15 years. I haven't spoken to her in 20, so I'm probably not the person to ask about forgiveness. The honesty was brutal, but Eli preferred it to platitudes. I don't know if I can forgive her, Eli said quietly. Then don't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Mara turned back to the stove. But don't let her take up space in your head that she doesn't deserve. She made her choices. You make yours. Rosie spoke up from the counter. I don't want to talk to Mommy. Both Mara and Eli looked at her. Why not? Mara asked gently. Rosie's voice was small but certain. Because she left us, and Knox didn't. The words hung in the air like smoke. Mara's expression softened, barely, but enough to notice. She walked over to Rosie and touched her shoulder lightly. You're a smart kid. Don't forget that. That night, the clubhouse filled with ghost reapers. Not just the core members, but the extended crew. Men who rode in from other chapters, other cities, bound by patches and history, and something that ran deeper than blood. They gathered around the table, passing bottles and food, talking in low voices about runs and repairs and people Eli didn't know. Reaper sat across from Eli, nursing a beer, watching him with those pale, calculating eyes. You settling in? Reaper asked. Eli shrugged. I guess. That's not an answer. Eli met his gaze. I don't know what you want me to say. That this is perfect? That I'm not waiting for it to fall apart? Reaper's mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. That's honest, at least. He took a drink. You know why I came back that night? When Curtis blocked the road? Eli shook his head. Because Knox called me. Told me he fucked up. That he'd let his guilt over his daughter cloud his judgment. That bringing you and your sister here was selfish and stupid and probably going to get everyone killed. Reaper leaned forward. And then he asked me to help him anyway. Eli didn't know what to say. I've known Knox Mercer for 8 years, Reaper continued. Served with him overseas, did time with him stateside. He's the most stubborn, self-destructive son of a bitch I've ever met. But he's also the only man I've ever trusted to have my back when it mattered. He paused. So when he called and asked me to ride into a shitstorm to save 2 kids he barely knew, I didn't hesitate. Why are you telling me this? Eli asked. Because you need to understand what you walked into. Reaper's voice hardened. This club isn't a charity. It's not a foster home. It's a brotherhood built on loyalty and sacrifice and the understanding that we're all we've got. Knox took you in, which means we all took you in. And that means you're ours now, which comes with protection. But it also comes with expectations. Eli's chest tightened. What kind of expectations? That you don't bullshit us. That you don't run when things get hard. That you understand we're not your parents, and we're not trying to be. Reaper set down his beer. We're a family, but not the kind that pretends everything's fine. The kind that bleeds together and survives anyway. Eli looked around the table, at Spider and Axe arguing about carburetors, at Prophet telling a story that made everyone laugh, at Knox sitting quietly at the far end, smoking a cigarette and watching everything with those tired, careful eyes. I can do that, Eli said. Reaper nodded once, then he raised his beer. To broken things worth fixing. The others raised their drinks. Eli didn't have one, but he raised his water glass anyway, and for the first time since arriving, he felt like maybe he belonged. 2 weeks later, the social worker arrived for her monthly review. Her name was Carol Brennan, no relation to the detective, apparently, and she carried a clipboard and an expression that suggested she'd seen everything and believed nothing. She interviewed Eli alone first, then Rosie, then Knox and Mara together. She walked through the clubhouse, inspecting rooms, checking locks, making notes that could mean anything. When she finished, she sat down with all of them at the kitchen table. I'm going to be honest, Carol said. This is the most unconventional placement I've ever supervised. And I've supervised a lot. Knox's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. But, Carol continued, unconventional doesn't mean unsuccessful. Eli, Rosie, you both seem healthier than when you first entered custody. You're attending school regularly, your medical checkups are clean, and most importantly, you both report feeling safe here. She looked at Knox and Mara. That being said, you're on probation. Any violation, criminal activity, substance abuse, failure to meet supervision requirements, and this arrangement ends immediately. Are we clear? Crystal, Knox said. Carol made a final note on her clipboard. Good. Then I'll be back in 30 days. After she left, the clubhouse exhaled collectively. Mara poured coffee and handed a cup to Knox. That went better than expected. For now, Knox said. He looked at Eli and Rosie. You heard her. We screw up. You're gone, so we don't screw up. That night, Eli couldn't sleep. He lay in the small bedroom they'd given him. Rosie slept in the next room over, close enough that he could hear her breathing through the thin walls, and stared at the ceiling, trying to process the weight of everything that had happened. Curtis was in federal custody awaiting trial. The charges included attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, kidnapping, drug trafficking, and about a dozen others Eli couldn't remember. His court-appointed lawyer had apparently advised him to take a plea deal. He was looking at 25 to life. Eli's mother was somewhere in witness protection, going through treatment. The social worker had told him she was doing well, but that contact would remain restricted for at least another year, maybe longer. The people Curtis had worked for, the ones Detective Brennan had mentioned, had apparently scattered when the investigation went federal. Some arrested, some disappeared. None of them a threat anymore. It should have felt like closure. But instead, Eli just felt empty. Around 2 a.m, he gave up on sleep and walked out into the main room. Knox sat alone at the bar, working on something mechanical by lamplight. He glanced up when Eli approached but didn't say anything. Eli pulled up a stool and sat down. They existed in silence for 5 minutes. Knox worked. Eli watched. You ever wonder what would have happened if you'd just closed that gate? Eli asked quietly. That first night? Knox set down his tools. Every day. And I'd probably sleep better, drink less, have fewer arguments with Reaper. Knox's mouth twitched. But I'd also be the kind of man who could ignore a 6-year-old freezing to death in a blizzard. And I've done a lot of bad things in my life, kid. I didn't need to add that to the list. Eli looked at his hands. Detective Brennan told me you're criminals, that you don't get to play hero. She's not wrong. Knox lit a cigarette. We're not heroes. We're just people who fucked up enough times to recognize when someone else is about to. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, that's enough to make a difference. Is that what I am? Your chance to make a difference? Knox was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. My daughter would be about your age now, 14, maybe 15. I don't know. I haven't seen her since she was 6. He took a drag from his cigarette. I tell myself she's safe, happy, living a better life than I could have given her. But I don't know that. I'll never know that, and it eats at me every single day. He looked at Eli. So yeah, maybe you are my chance to make a difference. Maybe you're my way of trying to fix something I broke that can't be fixed. But that doesn't make you a burden. It doesn't make you less worthy of protection. It just means I'm selfish enough to need this as much as you do. Eli felt something crack in his chest. I don't know how to thank you. Don't. Knox's voice hardened. You want to thank me? Survive, thrive, become someone who doesn't need us anymore. That's all the thanks I need. They sat together until dawn began filtering through the windows, 2 people trying to build something stable from pieces that had been shattered too many times to count. Spring came slowly to Black Hollow. Snow melted into mud. Roads cleared. The compound shed its winter weight and emerged scarred but intact. Eli worked on the shovelhead every day after school, learning the language of engines and metal. Knox supervised, offering corrections when necessary, but mostly letting Eli figure things out through trial and error. It was frustrating, exhausting work. But every time Eli got something right, a piston seated properly, a carburetor balanced, wiring connected without sparking, he felt something like pride. Rosie had started drawing constantly. Her notebook filled with pictures of motorcycles and leather vests and men with kind faces beneath hard exteriors. Mara hung them on the clubhouse walls like they were art worth preserving. The Ghost Reapers adapted to having children in their space with surprising grace. They cursed less, drank more carefully, kept the worst of their business behind closed doors. Spider taught Rosie how to play poker. Prophet told stories about deployments that were probably sanitized for young ears, but captivating anyway. Axe showed Eli how to throw a proper punch in case he ever needed to defend himself. On a Saturday morning in April, Knox walked into the garage where Eli was elbow-deep in the shovelhead's transmission. Take a break, Knox said. We're going for a ride. Eli wiped grease from his hands. Where? You'll see. They mounted Knox's Harley and rode out of Black Hollow, heading west into high country, where the air thinned and the landscape opened into something almost beautiful. Knox didn't explain where they were going, just rode in steady silence, navigating roads Eli didn't recognize. After an hour, they pulled into a small cemetery on a hillside overlooking a valley. Knox killed the engine and dismounted. Come on, he said. They walked through rows of weathered headstones until Knox stopped in front of one that looked newer than the others. The inscription was simple. Sarah Lynn Mercer, beloved daughter, 2015 to 2017. Eli's breath caught. Knox stared at the headstone with an expression that looked carved from stone. She died when she was 7. Car accident. Her mother was driving, lost control on ice. His voice was flat, empty. I found out 3 days later. Nobody called me. I had to hear it from a buddy who saw the obituary. Eli didn't know what to say. I wasn't allowed at the funeral, Knox continued. Restraining order, but I came anyway, stood at the back. Watched them lower her into the ground. He paused. I told you she was alive because it was easier than admitting I failed her completely. You didn't fail her, Eli said quietly. I did. Every day I was overseas, every time I chose the bottle over showing up. Every fight I picked that made her mother afraid to let me near her. Knox's jaw tightened. I failed her in every way a father can fail. And then she died, and I didn't even get to say goodbye. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, Knox looked at Eli. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what you're getting. I'm not a good man. I'm not someone you should look up to or try to be like. I'm just someone who's trying very hard not to fail again. Eli felt tears burning behind his eyes. You're not failing. Not yet. Knox turned away from the headstone. But every day's a test, and I don't always pass. They rode back to Black Hollow in silence. But something had shifted. Some weight had been shared. Some truth had been spoken that couldn't be unspoken. When they pulled into the compound, Reaper was waiting at the gate. We got a problem, Reaper said. Knox's expression darkened. What kind? The kind that showed up asking questions about custody arrangements and legal guardianship and whether the Ghost Reapers are fit to raise children. Knox swore quietly. Who? Jennifer Vance's lawyer. Eli felt ice settle in his stomach. The lawyer's name was Patricia Holloway, and she sat in the clubhouse conference room, a space normally reserved for club business, with a briefcase that probably cost more than the entire compound's monthly income. She wore a tailored suit and an expression that suggested she was used to winning arguments through sheer force of competence. Knox, Mara, and Eli sat across from her. Rosie was in the other room with Spider, kept deliberately out of the conversation. Let me be clear, Patricia said, opening her briefcase. My client, Jennifer Vance, has completed 6 weeks of intensive residential treatment. She's clean, she's cooperating with federal prosecutors, and she's requesting supervised visitation with her children. Eli's hands clenched beneath the table. Knox's voice was ice. Your client abandoned her children to a meth dealer who tried to kill them, repeatedly. My client was a victim of an abusive relationship and substance dependency, Patricia countered smoothly. She's seeking treatment. She's taking responsibility. And she has parental rights that supersede any guardianship arrangement you've established. Those rights were terminated when she endangered her children, Mara said. Temporarily suspended. Not terminated. Patricia pulled out documents, and now she's petitioning to have them reinstated, with supervision, counseling, continued treatment, all of which the court will likely grant. Knox leaned forward. She doesn't want them back. She wants to feel better about abandoning them in the first place. Patricia's expression didn't change. What she wants is to rebuild a relationship with her children, which is her right. And frankly, Mr. Mercer, given your own history, military discharge, assault charges, association with a criminal organization, I don't think you're in a position to judge anyone's parenting. The room fell silent. Eli found his voice. I don't want to see her. Patricia looked at him with something that might have been sympathy. I understand this is difficult. No, you don't. Eli's voice shook. You don't understand anything. She left us. She chose drugs over us. She let Curtis hurt us. And now she wants to come back and pretend none of that happened? She's not pretending, Patricia said carefully. She's acknowledging her mistakes, trying to make amends. I don't care, Eli stood. I don't want her amends. I don't want her apologies. I want her to leave us alone. Patricia made a note on her legal pad. The court will take your preferences into account, but ultimately, this decision isn't yours to make. Then whose is it? The judges, based on what's in the best interest of the children. Knox stood slowly. This meeting's over. You want to petition the court? Go ahead. But until there's a legal order saying otherwise, these kids stay here, under our protection, and you don't come back without a lawyer of your own. Patricia gathered her documents with practiced efficiency. You'll be hearing from us soon. She left. The silence that followed was suffocating. Eli felt everything spinning out of control again. Just when things had started to feel stable, here came another threat. Another person trying to take away the only safe place he'd ever found. Knox put a hand on his shoulder. Hey, look at me. Eli looked up. This doesn't change anything, Knox said. You're not going anywhere. We'll fight this. Legally, properly, and we'll win. How do you know? Because we have something your mother doesn't. Knox's grip tightened slightly. We have you. And you get a voice in this. The court has to listen. Mara spoke from across the table. And because we've got lawyers too, good ones, veterans advocacy groups who specialize in non-traditional family arrangements. We're not going into this unprepared. Eli wanted to believe them, but he'd learned not to trust promises. Over the next 3 weeks, the legal battle unfolded in conference rooms and courthouses, a war fought with documents and testimonies instead of fists. Eli and Rosie were interviewed by child psychologists. Knox and Mara underwent additional background checks. Character witnesses appeared. Deputy Harris, now recovered and back on duty, testified that the Ghost Reapers had acted in defense of minors and law enforcement. Carol Brennan, the social worker, provided reports showing consistent improvement in Eli and Rosie's well-being. Jennifer Vance appeared via video link from her treatment facility, looking healthier than Eli remembered but still wearing the hollow-eyed exhaustion of someone fighting demons that didn't sleep. She cried when she saw Eli and Rosie on the screen, apologized, begged for a chance to prove she could be better. Eli felt nothing. The judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Chen, who'd apparently seen every variation of family dysfunction Colorado had to offer, listened to everything with an expression that gave away nothing. Finally, after 3 hours of testimony, she made a ruling. Ms. Vance, Judge Chen said, looking at the video screen, "You've made significant progress in your recovery, and I commend you for that. However, recovery is a process, not an event. Your children have been placed in a stable environment where they're thriving. Disrupting that now would serve your needs, not theirs." Jennifer's face crumpled. "I'm denying your petition for custody reinstatement," Judge Chen continued. "However, I'm granting supervised visitation, 2 hours per month at a neutral location, with a licensed therapist present. If you maintain your sobriety and complete your treatment program, we'll revisit this in 6 months." Patricia started to object. Judge Chen held up a hand. "As for the guardianship arrangement," the judge looked at Knox and Mara, "I'm approving permanent custody under the Veteran Outreach Program, with continued monthly supervision and annual reviews. This is not adoption. Ms. Vance retains parental rights. But functional custody belongs to Mr. Mercer and Ms. Quinn." She banged her gavel. It was over. Synced. That night, the clubhouse filled with Ghost Reapers celebrating a victory that felt bigger than it was. Beer flowed. Stories were told. Someone put on old blues music that rattled through cracked speakers. Eli sat on the back steps watching Rosie play with a stray cat that had wandered into the compound. She'd named it Harley. It was missing an ear and had a crooked tail, but Rosie loved it with the fierce protectiveness of someone who understood what it meant to be broken and still worth saving. Knox emerged from the clubhouse and sat down beside him, holding 2 bottles of root beer. He handed one to Eli. "Not celebrating?" Knox asked. "Doesn't feel like something to celebrate," Eli said. "My mom's still out there, still wanting us back." "Yeah, she is." Knox took a drink. "And maybe someday you'll want that too. Maybe you'll forgive her, build something new, or maybe you won't. Both are okay. How do you live with it? The guilt?" Knox was quiet for a long time. "I don't. Not really. I just try to do better today than I did yesterday. Some days I succeed, some days I don't. But I keep trying." Eli looked at the clubhouse behind them, at the lights glowing warm through windows, at the motorcycles lined up like soldiers on watch, at the family they'd built from broken pieces. "Thank you," Eli said quietly, "for not closing the gate." Knox's expression softened, barely, but enough. "Thank you for knocking." They sat together as night fell over Black Hollow. 2 people who'd found something neither of them had been looking for, but both of them desperately needed. Inside the clubhouse, someone started singing, off-key and drunken, but full of life. Rosie laughed at something the cat did, and for the first time in longer than Eli could remember, the future didn't feel like something to survive. It felt like something to build. 6 months later, on a cold October morning, Eli finished rebuilding the shovelhead. The engine roared to life on the first kick, rumbling with power that felt earned rather than given. Knox stood nearby, arms crossed, wearing something that might have been pride beneath his usual stoic expression. "Not bad," Knox said. Eli grinned. "Not bad. Don't let it go to your head. There's still work to do." But Knox's mouth twitched. "You did good, kid." They stood together in the garage while the shovelhead idled, filling the space with sound that felt like possibility. Rosie burst through the door, backpack bouncing, cheeks flushed from running. "Eli, Mara says we're going to the diner for breakfast. Can we, please?" Eli looked at Knox. Knox shrugged. "I could eat." They piled into Knox's truck. Eli up front, Rosie in the back, Mara driving because Knox's license was suspended for another 3 months. The diner sat on the edge of town, a relic from decades past when Black Hollow had been something other than a place people escaped from. They ordered too much food. Rosie got chocolate chip pancakes and ate them with the focus of someone who'd learned never to waste anything. Eli ordered eggs and toast. Knox got black coffee and nothing else until Mara forced him to eat something. Social workers coming next week, Mara said between bites. Annual review. We'll be ready, Knox said. Rosie looked up from her pancakes. Are they going to take us away? No, Knox said. The certainty in his voice was absolute. You're ours. That's not changing. Rosie smiled and went back to eating. Eli watched the dynamics at the table, Mara nagging Knox to take better care of himself, Knox pretending to be annoyed but clearly not, Rosie chattering about school and friends, and the cat she'd smuggled into her room despite the no pets rule. This was family, messy and imperfect, and built from pieces that shouldn't fit together but somehow did. After breakfast, they drove back to the compound. The Ghost Reapers were gathering for a weekend run, 20 motorcycles heading north into high country, a tradition they did twice a year. Eli and Rosie weren't going, too young, too dangerous, but they stood at the gate watching the bikes line up. Reaper pulled up beside Knox. We'll be back Sunday night. You got this? Knox nodded. We're good. Reaper looked at Eli. You keeping him out of trouble? Eli grinned. Trying. Good luck with that. Reaper kicked his bike to life. One by one, the Ghost Reapers roared out of the compound, a river of leather and chrome and brotherhood forged in combat and survival. Knox stood at the gate watching them go until the sound of engines faded into distance. Then he turned to Eli and Rosie. Come on, let's go work on that shovelhead. See if we can't get it road ready. They walked back into the garage together. A broken veteran, a medic with scars nobody talked about, and 2 kids who'd survived things that should have killed them. The shovelhead sat waiting, gleaming under fluorescent lights. Eli grabbed a wrench. Knox fired up the engine. And in the cold Colorado morning, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and coffee, and possibility, they built something that looked like home. In Black Hollow, Colorado, the Ghost Reapers Motorcycle Club is still feared by most of the town. Dangerous men, violent men, outlaws with records and scars and histories they don't discuss. But for 2 kids who had nowhere left to run, they became something far more important than heroes. They became family, and sometimes, in a world that's cold and cruel and unforgiving, that's the only victory that matters. If this story moved you, hit that like button and comment where you're watching from. These stories exist because you're here. Thank you for staying until the end. Until next time, stay safe out there.